Hello, good to be back with everybody today. Today is February 14th, or as some people call it, Valentine's Day. Hope you and your Valentine are having a good day, and thank you for tuning in. Today's show is we're going to be getting into right in a moment, but I wanted to give us a little bit of introduction. My name is Bill Dixon. The show is Lessons of Vietnam. I was in Vietnam in 67, 68. I was part of the 59 Engineer Group, headquarters company, part of the 20th Engineer Brigade. Now I was at Long Binh, big place. What we try to do on the Lessons of Vietnam show is we try to tell the real story of the Vietnam War and the men and women involved. There were so many myths, lies, and half-truths out there. We're brought to you on the second Monday of each month, of course, by Nissan Communications. We always thank Amnon for pushing all the buttons and whistles and making us work. If you would like to be a guest on the show or you have a question or comment, please give me an email message from me. My name is DixonBill80@yahoo.com. And we'll go right on to the next slide, if you would, Amnon, please. There you go. This time of year with getting over the holidays, and now we're into Valentine's Day. There's a lot of stress out there, especially with the COVID going on. And that. If you are a veteran or you're a family member of a veteran, and you feel like you need to talk to somebody or whatever, just please dial 1-800-273-8255. And if you press 1, you'll get someone in the military who's been in the military and taught online. So please reach out. Don't be one of the 22. You'd be surprised at how much better you feel just by talking to somebody, so forth. Okay, now we're getting into the show. Today is a day in the life of ground troops in Vietnam, part 4. This series, A Day in the Life, investigates the day-to-day challenges of being involved in a war with an environment like Vietnam. They were not just the Viet Cong or North Vietnam Army to contend with, but the environment could be just as deadly and sometimes deadlier. Someone once said that what you can't see won't hurt you. That might work for your peace of mind during the night at home, but let me tell you, what you did not know about Vietnam creatures could ruin your day. These creatures were always found in the damnedest of all places, first thing in the morning. You can find them in your pockets, boots, helmets, rucksack, canteen cup, or laying with you under the warmth of your lightweight poncho liner blanket. Okay? Now, I've got some, what I did was I went in and found some stories from other veterans. So maybe I should start this part off being, this ain't no shit. That's how Vietnam veterans start their stories. This one by Mr. Lockwood here. And it says, using insects to inflict pain has continued into recent times. During the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong dug a network of underground tunnels, allowing them to decide when and where to fight, sometimes lobbing wasp and hornets' nests in the U.S. positions to disrupt defenses before launching an attack. Wasp nest, okay, a big, one of those big things of wasp. Repeated the American commodores who sent into the subterranean passages to engage the enemy, stumbling into booby traps instead of feeling his way through a dark passage. A tunnel rat might overlook a tripwire and have a load of scorpions rain down from a hidden cavity in the roof. Didn't sound very pleasant. The Viet Cong also conscripted the Asian giant honeybee. That's a big bee. Described by tropical entomologists as the most ferocious stinging insect on Earth. Soldiers gingerly relocated colonies to trails used by the Americans and then attached a small explosive charge. When an enemy patrol passed by, a patiently waiting BC set off the blast. Infuriated insects drove the soldiers into dangerous disarray. That's what they run like hell. Tarantulas and other species, size of spiders, some of the size of dinner plates, red ants, and black horseflies, all hurt like hell when they bit. Bees, red wasps, hornets, centipedes, multipedes, lizards, frogs, cats, scorpions, land and water leeches, orangutans, spider monkeys, bats, and hordes of mosquitoes attacked us wherever we entered their domain. That little bug in the photo is Scalopendrum, subspecies also known as the Vietnamese centipede, or Chinese redhead or jungle centipede. It's extremely aggressive and its venomous bite hurts like hell, sources say. But the fun doesn't stop with the centipedes. Giant scorpions were also known to bother American troops in bivouac. Now you can see there the young man's holding a millipede. You've probably seen millipedes here, maybe an inch long or so forth. But Vietnam grows little people and big everything else. Okay, got an anthill right there. Imagine you're in some kind of a tank or armored vehicle, busting down trees in the jungle, and suddenly you bust down the wrong tree. One filled with a nest of red ants. These buggers were reported immune to the issued bug spray, and given the choice between NVA small arms fire and dealing with red ants in the tank crews would either bail on the tank or man the vehicle completely naked. They were often referred to as communist ants because they were red in color and never seemed to attack the Vietnamese. I remember one day we were walking on an armored personnel carrier, and we hit an anthill like that, and we all got out off that APC really quick because they were eating us up. But you can see one there, how big they were. Yes, one of my yucks. Leeches in the Mekong Delta by Tom Hayne. Without a sense of humor, Vietnam would have been unbearable. Amen. What followed is something that happened to me when I was an FNG. That's a funny new guy. We were constantly in water in the Mekong Delta. Amen. Most of it was more like thin mud than it was like water. And most of it was on its way to the South China Sea. Moving water didn't normally have leeches breeding in it, but standing brackish water did. And there was enough of that too. The leeches in Vietnam were huge. Reddish black, slimy, blood-sucking globs that should all die and burn in hell. Amen. Even now, after 25 years, I still hate those miserable aquatic vampires. Leeches would find exposed skin like a magnet finds BBs. They got under shirts and into pants. You couldn't do what grunts in the Delta did without getting leeches on you. They like the warm, soft moisture of your body, think between your knees and your waist. There were two good ways to get them off. You could burn them with a cigarette, or you could spray them with insect repellent. The cigarette trick was the fastest, but you had to handle it with wet hands, and you didn't want to miss. Bug juice was the preferred method because it was plentiful and leeches hated it. A little squirt of it would make them curl up and fall off, but also burn. You can see almost all the pictures you see of a grunt out in the jungles of Vietnam. You're going to see that little bottle in his helmet, that insect repellent. Everyone had a couple of plastic 4-ounce bottles of bug juice, and we got more on every resupply chopper. Without a heavy application of it, the mosquitoes would eat you alive at night. It was mildly irritating to skin. Mildly? Burning to more sensitive places. Yeah. And you really didn't want it in your eyes. Bug juice was a tool of war. We used it for lighting fires, cleaning weapons, repelling creatures, great and small, and mixed with sea rations, peanut butter, and lit for cooking cans of ham and lima beans. Well, you got to be hungry to want the ham and lima beans. Okay, after we crossed brackish water, we checked for leeches. If one guy found a leech, we all had them. We used a buddy system to check the places that we couldn't see without a mirror. Nobody wanted slimy, blood-sucking leeches on them. So a little expositionist was a reasonable trade-off. It worked. Oh, I can feel that all just looking at the picture. Been there, felt that. One time after we had crossed some nasty, smelly water, we stopped to check for leeches. When I dropped my pants, I had a couple of them on my legs. I freaked out and couldn't get them off fast enough. As I bent over to burn them with a cigarette, one of the guys standing right behind me said, "There's one right there in the crack of your ass." Of all the places to have a leech, that was one of two places I really didn't want to find one. My response was, "Get it off." Now, in Vietnam, we also had a good time with each other. He said, "Don't move," and he proceeded to take careful aim with a plastic bottle of bug juice. He squeezed it with both hands, producing a pinpoint stream with sufficient force to cut grass, directed square at my asshole. The laughter that erupted from all around told me that I'd been had. There was no leech, and the asshole is one of the two places where you really don't want to be sprayed with bug juice. Before too long, I started feeling a burning sensation. The irritation got hotter and hotter, and the laughter got louder and louder. I had to jump back into that leech soup water to try to put out the fire. What are friends for? Everyone got a good laugh out loud out of it, but I was not amused. My backside was going to be stinging for the rest of the day. After a short while, we had to move on, and I had to manage the best I could. I had to walk bent over and pigeon-toed for a while, but it didn't last forever. I got over the sore ass, and I got on being the butt of the joke. Looking back on it now, it was kind of funny. It was something that only an FNG would fall for. The morale of this story could be, in the face of adversity, bend over and crack a smile, and those around you will smile too. Or checking for leeches is not all that's cracked up to be. Guy's a poet. Vietnam was like a zoo in itself. We saw so many different animals while over there. Water buffalo, elephants, crocodiles, snakes, monkeys, and mongooses. I never saw the elephant up close, only through binoculars. Unfortunate for them, they were a target of an ARA, air rocket artillery, because the enemy was using them to move supplies, going on the Ho Chi Minh Trail with elephants. As for the crocodiles, there was one time when our company had to cross upriver from where we were because the crocs were all over the place. Snakes like the bamboo viper caused trouble for the men. I was never bitten and never treated a snake bite, but I knew medics who did. They'd use a tourniquet near the wound and evacuate them right away. Now, all the animals were undesirable. One of the grunts infantrymen in our platoon carried a mongoose as his pet, and a lot of soldiers had pet monkeys. They were not exactly the most friendly animals in the world either. There were also land leeches, worm-like parasites. They had a chemical in their saliva that acted as anticoagulant, opening up your capillaries and allowing your blood to flow right into them. Because of the triple canopy jungle, the vegetation was always damp, a great breeding ground for leeches. If you stopped to rest or lay down in that vegetation, you became the host. When they first attach to you, they're about the thickness of a pencil. But by the time they're done with you, they're as thick as a thumb and gorged with blood, your blood. They were annoying but easy to get off. We just sprinkled them with salt from our sea rations. Never heard of that one. The problem was the anticoagulant prevented the wound from clotting, so you kept bleeding for a while. We'd put several layers of gauze and direct pressure on the wound until the bleeding had finally stopped. Now, I'm going to stop right real quick here. Depending on where you were in Vietnam, what unit you were with, and the location you were, everybody's story is going to be somewhat different. Never use the salt. Pouring salt into an open wound is not exactly my way of having a good day. We usually use the cigarette or the bug juice and so forth. So going to be found a little bit of difference what part of the country they were in and what years they were there. Okay, let's get on to the next one here. Oh, this is by the same medic. This was from a medic. One evening while we're out in the jungle. Okay, real quick. Okay. If you're easily offended, you might want to skip this part. One evening while we're out in the jungle, Sergeant Belcher came up to me and said, "Hey, Doc, I have a leech on me." I wondered where this leech was. Well, it turned out it was on his dick. I started laughing. Of course, he played this up, laughing along. So right there in the jungle, I poured salt on the leech, and it fell off. But I couldn't stop the bleeding, but get the bleeding to stop. Belcher said, "You're the medic. Stop the bleeding." I obeyed my orders. I started wrapping his penis. Now, there were infantrymen with us who had cameras with them and took pictures. Somewhere in this country, someone has a picture of that. Eventually, his wound did clot, but not before significant effort and embarrassment. Of course, Belcher told me to never tell this story. That was by David Dr. McCallum. Okay? So they like the warm, soft areas of your body. The Zippo served more purpose than just lighting the cigarettes of the tired and weary. It had alcohol in the lighter fluid, and the lighter fluid formula was one of the things that would make a leech open its mouth. Never tried this one. Water and land leeches were often found in areas like the Mekong Delta, as well as swamps and paddies where there were heavy vegetation. The standard would be one person dropping his pants and pulling his shirt open, and his buddy is checking the first guy where he cannot see. Coates explained. If a leech is found on the body or he clamped on, the Zippo lighter gets open, the cotton composite inside that hole in the fluid is pulled out, and that's used to dab the head of the leech or the butt of the leech. The standard would be one person dropping his pants and pulling his shirt open, and his buddy is checking the first guy where he cannot see. Coates explained. If a leech is found on the body or is clamped on, the Zippo lighter gets open, the cotton composite inside the holding the fluid is pulled out, and that's used to dab the head of the leech. The lighter also became popular on search and destroy missions known as Zippo raids. Troops would set fire to huts of suspecting enemy forces or ignite napalm from M132s or M762s if the electronic emissions failed. Today, the Zippo company still holds the same promise. If any Zippo lighter ever fails to work, we'll fix it for free. From serving as collector's items to being function for everyday use, the Zippo remains a relic for many Vietnam veterans of a more poignant time. And there's quite a bit of people collect the Zippo lighters, and some of them are worth a lot of money. Why did Navy SEALs in Vietnam wore blue jeans instead of jungle fatigues? You can see a bunch right there of SEALs, and they're all wearing jeans. Let's talk about why they're wearing those jeans. This is by Matt Freitas. The U.S. Navy SEALs established their reputation as a fierce maritime commando force during the Vietnam War. These men were men with green faces, as they were known to the Viet Cong enemies. Often wore green face paint and disguised themselves in black pajamas. On nighttime operations, however, the SEALs quickly learned that the jungle critters were a serious problem and needed an unconditional solution. One of the things about black pajamas, you had to dig leeches out because leeches were always tied to you. That's where we started having our girlfriend or wife send us pantyhose. We could put on pantyhose on and the leeches couldn't bite through them. They soon discovered that blue jeans made a better combat uniform alternative than the local Vietnamese garb. We started getting Levi's and started wearing Levi jeans with our cami tops, Hoyle said. They lasted a lot longer than any other type of clothing. With mosquitoes couldn't get through the denim. The leeches could crawl up the legs, so we put rubber bands around the bottom of my pant legs, Berta said. That mud didn't cling to Levi's like it did to camo pants, and there were no large side pockets on the jeans like there were in cami pants, and that would fill with water when you came out of a river or canals. What we used to do is I used to soak the cuffs of my pants where it come up with the bug juice, and then try to get some tape and tape my boot and my pant legs go so they couldn't get up. Didn't always work. This was by a gentleman by the name of Ray Sablin. He was webmaster of the 1st Battalion, 50th Infantry website. And I'm no stranger to ticks. I grew up on the Navajo reservations in northern Arizona and worked in the Coconino National Forest. I've seen stunted jumpers alive with swarming ticks. junipers. That's why. That's the reason it makes sense. I can't read my own stuff here. I've seen stunted junipers lie with swarming ticks, waiting to brush off en masse onto luckless horses or their riders. And I've had my share of ticks. They've gorged themselves fat on my blood, and I've killed them. No big deal. Most Vietnam War stories would be about leeches, those slimy, squirmy, blood-sucking parasites that you don't even know all over you until you take a technical rest and spot their sickening antics. But hey, they don't seem to bother me for some reason. One mission in the mountains, we were sneaking through a creek under double canopy, might have been triple for all I know, to do a cliff face assault on a supposed NVA helicopter attack training camp in a cave. And I think most everybody in Charlie Company got leeches but me, and heck, my boots and pants were wrapped the same as everybody else's. Same thing happened now when I go bushwalking. My family gets leeches, but I don't, knock on wood. But of course, I'm careful about it. But I hate ticks. There are 850 species of ticks worldwide, and I hate them all. They come in two families, the hard tick and the soft tick, and both blood-sucking arthropods transmit more disease than any other vector or bug. The effing ticks seek victims or hosts by means of science called questing, which we call ambush. They crawl up and perch on the edge of a grass or leaves or needles with their front legs extended, ready to latch on to any passing animal or grunt. There they wait, patiently. Then a minuscule brain sweeping for carbon dioxide, movement or heat as I pass by. Then they lunge and plant their ugly mugs with backward spines through my skin and suck, suck, suck. And the saliva hardens like cement while they're feeding to keep them at their trough. I hate ticks. That one right there hadn't been sucking too long. Ticks have never done anything for mankind. Well, except maybe for once when they provided a moment of levity for the battalion hardened troops of Charlie Company on an extended foot operation in the mountains of Tucor. And I hate ticks for that too. We worked for days through the mountains, mostly ridge running, dodging ancient punji sticks and bypassing the occasional perfectly round fishing pond created by B-52 strikes. The ultimate target was an elusive enemy, regiment headquarters, and we were part of a multi-company sweep searching for it, trying to ferret them out and blow them away. But instead, we found ticks. Or rather, ticks found me. The first assault was bad enough. Have you ever had a tick bury itself into the soft, fleshy part of your armpit? It's a constant irritant that doesn't go away no matter how much you scratch or pick at it. And in the tropics, there's the ever-present danger of infection as well. The whole idea is to get rid of the ticks before they bury their mouth too deep. Yeah, right. The problem with that free advice is that you don't notice them until it's already too late. Plus, you itch for days after they're out anyway. Anyway, the tick in my right armpit could have been an underground miner, so deep had it implanted itself. I did what comes naturally, ended up with its fat body tossed in the jungle somewhere and its dead head buried into my armpit to rot. Situation resolved for the most part, but then things took a turn for the worse. Yeah, that's going to get infected, that head. I felt the telltale signs of a tick infestation again. Localized pain, itchiness, discomfort. Here I should mention that I didn't wear underpants in the field. Yeah, I know, people who hadn't been in Nam might think that was kinky, and heck, it might even turn to a few women on. Well, that's none that I know, but it did tend to stop rashes, diaper rashes, and infections, especially when we were down in the Delta area. Anyway, one of my natural barriers to ticks was down, and they had only jungle pants that penetrate to seize the high ground. and sees it, this particular tick, whom I choose to believe was female, did it. She seized it with a vengeance and buried herself with a sigh deep in the fleshy part of my circumcised. Well, it bothered me so much that I had to walk on patrol with my knees together. As the company commander of Charlie Company at the time, it's safe to say that the troops all had my best interest upmost in their minds at all times. When my predicament came known at the next tactical break, as I asked a medic to lend a hand, I was overwhelmed with well-meaning suggestions from the troops. I only mention a few because images associated with some others are too painful to contemplate even now. Yeah, Dick. The airborne solution was to climb a tree, tie a string around the tick and tree, and do a parachute landing fall. The alternative suggestion was to tie the dummy cord from the tick to the rock, swing the rock a few times over my head in a big loop, and then send it off the edge of a nearby cliff. All those sound like interesting. Another soldier suggested cutting an X and sucking the poison out, but I quickly reminded him that this was a treatment for a snake bite. Someone else suggested a judicious placement of C4, noting that the usual warning cry of fire in the hole might have to be modified. Alternatively, chemicals in the heat tablets would be so unpleasant that the tick would back out. If it didn't, the tabs could always be set alight to provide a little more motivation. What was wrong with the simple idea of blowing out a wooden match and placing the still hot head on the tick to get the same effect? The Wimtail solution was more straightforward and involved substituting one type of head for another. The tick for the apple and an M16 for the bow. Alternative suggestions of using an M60 or M79, which was the grenade launcher, M79, or even called for an 8-inch artillery fire weren't helpful, nor was amputation. In the end, pun intended, I tried using Army insect repellent to encourage Miss Tick to disengage, and when that didn't work, ripped her fat body off, leaving the head behind. Fortunately, it was nearly out and soon joined the body otherwise. I would probably have had to have some creative explaining over the years from time to time. I kept the crime scene liberally doused with disinfectant, and you guessed it, kept walking with my knees together until we emerged from the mountains a couple of days later. How much fun you could have in the jungles? We rarely saw our enemy, but they saw us. Only hours about landing, a sniper's bullet plowed a deep groove across the top of a Marine's head. He survived, but from then on, we suffered KIAs and WIAs from snipers, mortars, booby traps, mines, and friendly fire. We even had one MIA, missing in action. We've killed and captured both VC and NVA soldiers. We tried to protect civilians, but we weren't much good at it. Armies are more about destroying the enemy than winning hearts and minds, much less providing basic necessities and medical care for civilians. Fighting heat strokes, rain, leeches, rust, and fungus. We lived in the dirt. We slept in holes if we were lucky. We had no tents or sleeping bags, and sleeping in a hole provided some protection from enemy mortars, or slept on the ground fearfully. We marched without apparent purpose in chilling northeastern monsoons in the rains, suffered heat stroke with the arrival of the southwest monsoons, pulled leeches from our legs, ate little but field rations, and fought rust on our weapons and fungus on our bodies. You can see some feet there that have been feet wet all the time in the jungle boots. You can see grunts, Marine's legs right there where he'd been leeches or whatever, and the holes they left and got infected and so forth. Marines were zapped, never killed or wounded. This is what James has to say. Now, James from North Carolina. In some days, clothes would rot off. Yes. In 20-some days, clothes would rot off. Matter of fact, one time we came in from about Christmas, and we got the direct order not to go near the helicopter pad because some general was flying in and we looked too gross for him to see. I've heard stories of guys coming from the field going to the PX to get some stuff to take a bath with and told they couldn't go into PX because they were too dirty. That's what James goes on to say. Well, see, in August, out on patrol in the area around landing zone Marianne, it was triple canopy jungle. You couldn't see 10 foot in front of you, and when you got hit, when I was talking about mosquitoes and letters, see, we'd come in from the fire base for Christmas and was pretty excited about it. After walking, should have been a day and a half walk to come in or really get in. We were pretty excited about staying in. But it sent us back down to the fire base at the bottom. And the mosquitoes are just terrible. They're in the rice paddies and all, just terrible. In other words, they won't dress proper to be seen by other people. James, when you just slept on a hill, it was a little better there, and then you're trying to go to sleep. You're mad anyway, and the mosquitoes are just eating you, and they are 10 foot deep. James, in those mountains later, you had the leeches. The leeches would get so full of blood, you shake them 3 or 4 of them out of each pant leg. Not even though they were there. It was little black ones. But you had mosquitoes, leeches, and North Vietnamese, and that was always up there. And they all eat you up. You see that leech there. If you have a chance to read Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, I highly recommend it. The land itself could kill you. Remember Tim O'Brien? Yes, the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army were trying to kill them. But so were the swarms of mosquitoes that spread dengue fever throughout camps, and with 30 different kinds of venomous snakes whose bites would prove to be fatal. And if the land wasn't actively killing them, it was making them miserable. Morale was understandably low during the monsoon seasons. For example, when heavy rains would drench the soldiers and flood the rice paddies for the better part of 6 months. And when it wasn't raining, it was hot and humid. I found that my poncho was so hot that even if it was raining and I put my poncho on, I sweated so much anyway. But when it got cool in the evening, depending on where you were, the poncho was good to kind of keep the chill in a little bit. Let's talk about another wonderful thing. Between the rain and the sweat, the grunts were never completely dry. If they weren't miserable wet or miserably hot, they were miserable and hacking through the jungle brush and elephant grass with leaves so dense and so sharp they drew blood. Soldiers also had their blood sucked by leeches who made their home in the rice paddies. Now, elephant grass. Many Vietnam veterans recall calling the elephant grass wait a minute grass. This is because they would randomly cut their hands and cut their legs and get their boots caught in the grass. If you were going in there and if you had your sleeves rolled up, you would always roll your sleeves down. It could be over your head 10, 12 feet high and just cut you all to pieces. Okay? Elephant grass is rough to the touch with millions of hairs protecting its outer layer. It is green, yellow, or purple in color and boasts multi-branched stems, which make it resemble the hair of a glam rock band from the 70s and 80s. I don't remember so well. I guess a lot of rock bands had long, fuzzy hair. Its stems can reach 3 meters into the sky, dwarfing any man and leaving him shaded in a long, drooping shadow. Even the grass on the end of the stems can reach 3 feet in length and 1 inch in width. The leaves show a clear white central vein and come to a razor-sharp point. Now, walking through, you can hold your hand in front of your face, and you still can't even see your own hand. And you don't know where the bad guys are in there, the tiger in there, an elephant, or some time ago, it was a bomb had dropped. You might walk right off into a big bomb hole. One of the drawbacks of elephant is that it can hide danger as easily as it can provide cover and safety. So, as we descended a gently sloping hillside, there was a disturbance in the grass 30 or 40 feet to our left. Everyone immediately went into the hyper alert mode as we tried to discern what it was. Because the grass was tall, we didn't know if it was human or an animal. What we could tell was that it was coming towards us. When it got about 10 feet away, we could see that it was one pissed off looking warthog. It was running balls out on a path directly between myself and the lieutenant. Our quick thinking OCS grad flipped his M16 on full automatic and began to spray the area with a full clip, following the animal as it ran between us. Well, I get the words out. What the F are you doing? We get that out, it was all over. Evidently, he didn't get shot, though. Operation Fly Swatter by Mr. Young. Despite extensive experiences with mosquito-borne diseases affecting combat capabilities of the armed forces during World War II and Korea, in 1965, the United States military was unprepared to deal with the Anopheles mosquito in the highlands of South Vietnam and its subsequent malarial casualties. Regardless of the weaker use of prophylactic measures, up to 50% of American soldiers initially involved in combat operations in heavily forested regions of South Vietnam developed malaria. And I think everybody remembers the big orange pills. Not until nearly 2 years after the induction of American ground troops into the Southeast Asian conflict, the Department of Defense authorized the extensive insecticide and arrow spray necessary to protect both Allied and indigenous forces. Even then, military leadership failed to take advantage of much of the knowledge and experience of an existing stateside unit specifically tasked in arrow spraying and mosquito control. Why use something that's already been proven that works? Using modified UC-123 transport planes to spray malathion insecticide. Operation Fly Swatter was the eventual fixed-wing, large-area answer to the biting insect. Unlike the short time on target of the defoliation mission, the insecticide spray aircraft treetop-level flights lasted for as much as 2 of very hazardous hours of flying. Successful were these missions controlling the mosquitoes that preventive medicine requests ultimately resulted in 14 major Allied military bases and their adjoining Vietnamese cities being sprayed routinely every 9 days, weather permitting. The mosquito war required over 1,300 individual missions and dispensed approximately 1 million gallons of malathion concentrate. Now, I want to think watered that down like they were supposed to do with Agent Orange and didn't do it. Operation Fly Swatter was a significant part of the overall United States preventive medicine program to reduce the number of man days lost to ground forces due to malaria. Ironically, although the program was widely publicized through both military and civilian in-country channels, the memories of many veterans of the Vietnam War were later exposed to the insecticide spray missions with the spraying of Agent Orange defoliant in Vietnam. In other words, how do you know which one they were spraying? Malaria was spread by mosquitoes, has been influencing military campaigns in Southeast Asia since Kublai Khan. During World War II, Allied forces in the Pacific theater suffered more casualties from disease than from enemy action, and solving this problem became a major objective of Allied commanders. The Vietnamese phrase for malaria is Sat Ret Rung, which literally means jungle fever. The principal malarious region of South Vietnam was the Central Highlands, where the malaria parasite species encountered were Plasmodium falciparum. Okay, we're not even going to go there. Okay, we're going to skip all those words. You can read them. Predominantly on the coastal plains and Delta region. Unfortunately, the most serious malaria falciparum was also most prevalent, according to 50 to 75% of the cases in the United States Army in Vietnam. The deployment of major U.S. combat forces into South Vietnam found them unprepared for disease-ridden conditions. Despite the weekly use of prophylactic colchicine, primaquine pills, 5 to 50% of American soldiers coming off early field action in the heavily forested regions of South Vietnam would develop malaria. By December 1965, the overall Army admission rate for hospitalization was 98.4% admissions per 1,000 per year, nearly rivaling some Pacific Theater rates of World War II. Indeed, some units operating in Ao Drang Valley had rates as high as 600,000 a year. 2 of the first infantry battalions were sent into Central Highlands were rendered ineffective as a result of losses due to malaria. Compounding the threats to Allied troops in South Vietnam was the discovery of chloroquine-resistant Placinium. Infections in 1965, when up to 80% of cases failed to be cured by standard chloroquine therapy. I knew it was bad. I didn't realize it was all that bad. A highly effective new regime using quinine, pyrimethamine, and dapsone were adopted by the U.S. Army, but at the risk of some complications and side effects. Isn't everything? From 1965 to 1969, more than 2 of every 3 U.S. Army hospital admissions in Vietnam were a result of disease, mainly malaria. During the same period, battle injuries accounted for only 1 of 6 admissions. Equally important was the problem of introduction of malarial parasites into local mosquitoes by veterans of the various Allied nations on their return from Vietnam. In other words, we brought it home. Unlike previous wars, the rapid reparation home of veterans by air transport interfered with the requirement for the full 8 weeks of chemoprophylaxis, especially for the long latency PVACs. Malaria would be the greatest medical problem imported to the continental United States by Vietnam veterans. In other words, as we've talked about before, the soldier from Vietnam, from all the other wars, got on a ship, and they had 30 days or so on the ship to kind of get themselves acclimated mentally, and also it seems now it would be physically getting acclimated before they got home. Ironically, the enemy in Vietnam was both a major contributor to and a target of the same malarial infections that plagued the Allied forces. Interrogations of prisoners and review of captured documents indicated that the most serious problem faced by infiltrating North Vietnamese soldiers was malaria. Unit incident rates are as high as 50% were reported, with the most serious cases left behind at rest stops along the way, or even returned north. However, most disease-stricken infiltrators were forced to stay with their groups, albeit at the cost of low morale and delayed movement. Even groups fortunate enough to be occupied by medical corpsmen frequently faced a shortage of medical supplies to treat the various diseases. The result of high infection rates among the enemy personnel in conjunction with rates of 50 to 75% among chronically infected indigenous personnel provided a ready reservoir for the mosquitoes' population to feed on. Obviously, combat contact in enemy-held areas exposed Allied forces in regions where little or no preventive medicine had taken place. As a 1965 preventive medicine orientation to Vietnam pamphlet stated, there was a foolproof method of avoiding malaria in Vietnam. Don't get bitten by the Anopheles mosquito. As desirable as this solution, it was equally unlikely. You can see the man put himself in a box, sealing the box up. I mean, don't get bit by the mosquitoes. Must have been a politician. It was not until October 1966 that the United States Air Force headquarters, at the insistence of the commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, decided it could spare one of the ranch hand UC-123 defoliation aircraft to be reconfigured to spray insecticide methalon as part of a test program to reduce mosquitoes in South Vietnam. The test program, however, required a bite and count test by individuals located on the ground at night with flashlights in the sprayed areas. Not a desirable assignment in wartime Vietnam. I mean, out in the jungle with a flashlight counting mosquitoes. So the trials were relocated to test area in Thailand. On 14 October 1966, a ranch hand aircraft, thoroughly clean of herbicide residues and equipped with the finer orifice nozzle needed for insecticide dispersal, left Saigon for Bangkok, Thailand. Unfortunately, everything's got an unfortunately. Unfortunately, when the test aircraft arrived in Bangkok, it was discovered that an unusually dry season in the test area had reduced the mosquito breeding area to the point that the population was too low for meaningful evaluations. After several days in Thailand, the evaluation team returned to South Vietnam to conduct limited tests. Although reduction of the mosquito population would benefit the Viet Cong as well as Allied forces, the test aircraft would occasionally encounter ground fire. During one flight over a wide river valley, the aircraft received ground fire and a hit in the insecticide supply tank. The crew elected to emergency dump the entire remaining load of insecticide and return home. In other words, if you're going to shoot at me, we're going to leave. Despite continuing high casualty rates due to malaria, the test eradication program was terminated and nothing more occurred until early 1967. Ranch Hand, now a full-size separate United States Air Force squadron, the 12th Air Commodore Squadron, again was tasked to clean and prepare for the UC-123 aircraft for in-country tests. As before, the decision makers were ignoring and duplicating nearly 20 years of experience in spray operations and mosquito control programs already accumulated by the Special Aerial Spray Flight in the United States. At the initial development stages of the herbicide spray concept, SAF's only role in the Vietnam program had been to provide hands-on spray training at Langley to air crews selected for ranch hand assignment. I mean, why would you use the information that was already there? The reinvention of the wheel syndrome had once more become the delaying force behind a needed program. Again, because of the obvious dangers to observers spending the night in Vietnamese jungles counting mosquitoes, new trials were conducted over Con Sun Island, a secure island off the Mekong Delta. Following successful Con Sun trials, the 12th Air Commando Squadron was ordered to modify and permanently assign one of its 18 UC-122s to full-time pesticides duty over the control of the Surgeon General's office, codenamed Operation Fly Swatter. The UC-123 aircraft was the ideal vehicle for wide area pesticide spraying. Insect control had become an added task for the herbicide spraying squadron. Malathion storage and servicing were made available at 3 locations in Vietnam. Bien Hoa, which is right next to Long Binh, Bien Hoa Air Base there, Cam Ranh Bay, and Da Nang Air Base. Responsible units were the Army's 20th Preventive Medicine Unit, the Army 105th Medical Detachment, and the Navy's Preventive Medicine Unit. Respectively, the Navy unit was later replaced by the Air Force. To distinguish what became popularly known as the Bug Bird from the herbicide spraying aircraft of the squadron, they selected UC-123 was stripped of its camouflage paint and coated with an iodine compound to guard against the insecticide's corrosive effects. It was hoped that enemy troops would recognize the benefits provided by the aluminum-colored UC-123's anti-mosquito mission and therefore not attempt to shoot down the unarmed and unarmored obsolete transport, as they did the camouflage planes spraying the herbicides. Well, see, nobody gave them the program, so they didn't know they weren't supposed to shoot those. They were spraying good stuff. The first bug bird was Little Devil. Little Devil was soon replaced by Patches. Patches was one of the first 3 aircraft that originally entered South Vietnam in 1961 and got its name from the numerous hits received from ground fire and the many metal patches subsequently applied over the damaged skin. By 1967, the plane had taken well over 500 hits doing herbicide missions. It had also become the first and only C-123 to fly completely around the world, when in 1962 it returned to the United States by way of Afghanistan and Iran. where it assisted in their fight against a plague of locusts. When once again assigned to Vietnam, the aircraft became a sentimental favorite of the unit, and the airmen hoped to avoid losing the venerable old lady by assigning her to safer duty. With the withdrawal of United States combat forces from South Vietnam, Operation Fly Swatter was terminated in December 1971. The Mosquito War flew over 1,300 individual missions and dispensed more than 1.76 million liters of Valentine concentrate, about one half of the total insecticide dispensed by all forces during the conflict. The mosquito control program has significantly contributed to the reduction of U.S. Army man days lost to malaria from 228,000 in 1965 to 168,000 in 1970. That's a lot of men with malaria, despite the huge manpower increase during the same period. Most of the aircraft and ground equipment assets were turned over to the South Vietnamese Air Force as part of the Vietnamese program. Jim Baker, Infantry Recon Patrol. Mosquitoes weren't awful depending on where and when, rainy or dry season. I remember one night in the field I had rolled in my poncho liner, covering my head and leaving only the opening created by putting my hand on my head and holding the liner under my elbow. I counted killing 100 mosquitoes on my bicep before crawling over to my medic and telling him that I thought I was going crazy. Turns out I was delirious with phalanxum malaria, with a fever so high they called a nighttime dust-off to take me to hospitals. Lots of mosquitoes. We were repellent, but the VC could smell it. We were told, so it was seldom used in the field, and we're always in the field. By Stephen Gandy. Bugs are always a problem, along with heat, plants like sawgrass that literally cut, mud and rice paddies, and other forms of misery. In monsoons, the heat, if you wear a poncho in the rain, makes you wet. GIs were issued bug juice or DEET-type insect repellent. Maybe. Who knows what was in it? If you're going to be a grunt, expect bugs to be a problem. Flies, too. Now, I can also say for a fact that the biggest rats I have ever seen were in Vietnam. The first one I saw, I thought was a strange animal or some kind of a necky down in Panama. Nope, a rat. Let's not forget fungus and other parasites, ringworms, jungle rot, prickly heat. Now, don't be too surprised if you come across some baby cobras along the perimeter of a base. And you thought, well, they're just fighting the war. You didn't know how much fun we were having. But Harry, mosquitoes were awful. We had DEET repellent before it became commercially available, and it worked. But cross one of the numerous rivers and streams in the Delta region, and it washed off. You were immediately hit by swarms of insects where you came out of the water on the other side. You could inhale them if you weren't careful. That's how thick they were. What I hated most was the rats. They crawled over us when we were out on a night ambush, and when we tried to sleep in our hooch, made of ammo boxes filled with dirt. They were the size of cats. The hired Vietnamese helped caught them in cages, doused them with a lighter fluid, and burned them alive outside our hooch. Nice smell to wake up in the rare days when we were in garrison. Dan Snyder, ex-Army sergeant. Like many, I had malaria multiple times. Mosquitoes were bad everywhere. In Nam, if you don't sleep under a net, you were going to get chewed up. Now, if you were back in base camps or you actually had a cot, the ones out in the jungle didn't have such a thing. And you see the mosquito net. Obviously, grunts bivouacking near rice paddies are hit the worst. But even up in the mountains at altitude, they were pretty thick. And don't get me started on the leeches. You can see the mosquito. You can see the mosquito thing. But there was a poster there that said, "Don't be a dummy. Avoid malaria." The medics were always making sure that we took our malaria pills. The big, there it looks like they were yellow. The ones we had were the big orange ones. But bayonet drill tonight, in other words, mosquitoes. So, okay, so that was what an American soldier shares experiences by stating, "It is a terrible country for fighting. The jungle, trees, and vines that cover the sharp ridges and deep valleys of the mountains make military movement difficult. This is just a small example of how one soldier felt. Imagine hundreds in the same condition trying to fight a battle or communicate effectively. It wasn't easy. Insects, reptiles, and animals that lived in this terrain were also dangerous. They included malarial mosquitoes, leeches, ticks, fire ants, and 30 different kinds of venomous snakes. Other than natural dangers, soldiers also had to be aware of booby traps put on known patrol routes. Tripwires could be attached to a grenade or a mine. The health problems that came from battle in Vietnam were extensive. Many troops were unable to bathe or get dry food for days and weeks at a time, so hygiene was poor. Fungal infections of the feet were a major cause of temporary disability. Skin disease was a leading cause of outpatient visits and hospitalizations. Over 40,000 cases of malaria were reported in troops alone between 1965 and 1970, with 78 deaths. However, weekly medication helped keep the deaths from malaria down from past wars. The problems that are occurring today for veterans include the hepatitis C virus. It is commonly infected carried by the blood, and 63% of enrolled veterans testing positive for HIV are Vietnam-era veterans. Hepatitis C. This virus can lead to a life-threatening condition. Also, Agent Orange is proving to be a huge problem. Agent Orange was a mixture of chemicals and fillets used by the United States military forces during the Vietnam War to eliminate forest cover. And we're now finding out that it's going 5 generations of the Vietnam veteran, his children, his children's children, and their children. The American Forces Press Service, in an article on malaria vaccine research, quoted Dr. Stephen L. Hoffman, a Navy doctor and director of the malaria program at the Naval Medical Research Institute in Rockville, Maryland, says, in every military campaign this century, we have lost more casualties to malaria than bullets. During World War II and the Vietnam War, entire divisions ceased to be effective combat units due to malaria. Battles in Vietnam were constant, never ceasing long enough to give soldiers time to recover. In World War II, soldiers fought a battle on average of twice a year. In Korea, our soldiers fought a battle of average between 2 and 3 times a year. In Vietnam, our soldiers fought a battle every 3 weeks. Thanks to a helicopter. Post-traumatic stress. There is an obvious significant difference in these numbers. Soldiers were constantly on their guard, but even that didn't warn them for the Battle of Elzay X-Ray. American soldiers were surprised and ambushed in late October 1965. A large North Vietnamese force attacked the Playmate Special Forces camp. The battle lasted a day, but American soldiers first kept watch for 3 days. When nothing happened, Hal Moore's 1st Battalion was ordered to assault into our Drain Valley, which where the movie We Were Soldiers Once and Young came from. His mission was simple: find and kill the enemy. Little did Moore or any of the other soldiers know that had just plunged into the midst of the first major battle of the Vietnam War between the American Army and the People's Army of Vietnam. The uncertainty drove me crazy, Moore said. I never knew what was going to happen in the next second, whether I'd be alive or dead. I couldn't stand it all the time, but I wouldn't take it back, any of it back. Hundreds of Vietnam vets infected by a slow-killing parasite. A half-century after serving in Vietnam, hundreds of veterans have renewed reason to believe they may be dying from a silent bullet. Test results show some men have been infected by a slow-killing parasite while fighting in the jungles in Southeast Asia. The Department of Veterans Affairs commissioned a small pilot study to look into the link between liver flukes ingested through raw or uncooked fish and a rare bile duct cancer. It's also shrimp included in that. It can take decades for symptoms to appear. By then, patients are often in tremendous pain with just a few months to live. Of the 50 blood samples submitted, more than 20% came back positive or bordering positive with liver flukes antibodies, said the tropical medicine specialist who carried out the test at Seoul National University in South Korea. There was a research doctor in High Point, North Carolina, that was traveling around and giving speeches, and we have a show that she was on. So if you look back on some of the previous shows, you can get more information about the show. Also, you had to watch out for the poisonous trees. And its seeds contains toxins when ingested in high doses can cause death. Besides fluff or cat eye fruit contain poison serotonin, which causes itching and blistering in a touch. That looks like the bushes growing in my neighbor's yard, a tree, which I can't remember what it is right at the moment. But okay. And then the heartbreak grass. It doesn't like grass. It looks like a shrub. Okay. War is hell, and so is the environment to fight a war. Thank you for watching. Please tell your friends if you enjoyed the show. And if you didn't enjoy the show, please tell me so I can fix it. Our next show is 14th of March at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We look forward to seeing you again, and have a nice rest of February. Enjoy your Valentine's Day. Let's see what's coming up. Oh, looks like by the next show, we're going to be saving daylight time again. Do we fall forward or spring back? I guess we spring back. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you again.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.